The moment the electrical grid fails, modern civilization does not collapse instantly. Instead, it begins to unravel in layers. Lights go out first. Communications follow. Refrigeration systems shut down. Traffic control systems freeze. And the invisible infrastructure that supports daily life water pumps, data centers, fuel distribution, emergency coordination networks begins to degrade minute by minute. For most people, the first assumption during a blackout is that power will return soon. But history shows that large-scale grid failures do not behave like routine outages. When cascading failures occur across interconnected networks, restoration can take days, weeks, or even longer, depending on infrastructure damage. During that window, the difference between discomfort and survival often comes down to access to specific technologies, tools that allow individuals to maintain communication, energy, and environmental stability while the larger system remains. Offline emergency management agencies around the world study this exact scenario. Large metropolitan regions depend on continuous electrical input to operate water purification plants, telecommunications hubs, hospital systems, and fuel pumping stations. When the grid goes down, backup generators activate, but those generators depend on finite fuel supplies and complex maintenance schedules. In prolonged disruptions, those reserves deplete quickly. Once that happens, secondary failures cascade outward. Water pressure begins to fall as pumping stations lose energy. Cellular towers shut down as battery backups drain. Digital payment systems collapse because transaction verification servers are unreachable. The result is not a dramatic cinematic disaster, but something far more dangerous: the gradual disappearance of the systems people rely on without realizing it. Many people assume that survival during a grid-down event is primarily about stockpiling food or storing bottled water. Those preparations are important, but they only address the most basic layer of the problem. The deeper challenge in a prolonged infrastructure failure is maintaining capability. Capability means the ability to produce power, communicate with others, and adapt to environmental conditions without relying on centralized systems. This is where technology becomes decisive. Certain devices, often overlooked by casual preparedness discussions, act as force multipliers. They allow individuals or small groups to regain a fraction of the technological advantages that modern society normally provides automatically. However, these devices are rarely discussed in mainstream emergency advice because they sit in an unusual space between consumer electronics and technical survival equipment. They require some understanding to use effectively, and without context, their importance is easy to underestimate. As a result, many people preparing for emergencies focus heavily on visible supplies while ignoring the underlying systems that make survival sustainable beyond the first few days. Understanding these technologies requires examining how infrastructure actually functions during failure conditions, not to see why these tools matter. It helps to look at historical precedents. In 2003, a massive power outage swept across parts of the northeastern United States and Canada. More than 50 million people lost electricity in a matter of hours. Traffic lights stopped functioning across major cities. Subway systems shut down mid-route. Water systems experienced pressure drops as pumping stations lost power. Although electricity was restored relatively quickly in most areas, the event demonstrated how dependent modern urban environments are on uninterrupted electrical supply. Emergency services reported that one of the most serious problems was communication breakdown. Cellular networks became overloaded almost immediately as millions of people attempted to call family members simultaneously. When tower backup batteries began to drain, coverage deteriorated further. Communication failures during disasters are not unusual. After major hurricanes, earthquakes, or regional blackouts, conventional communication networks often become unreliable. within hours. This is because most infrastructure assumes stable electrical supply and manageable traffic loads. When those assumptions collapse, systems designed for convenience are forced into survival conditions they were never meant to handle. At that point, individuals who possess independent communication capability gain a crucial advantage. They can coordinate with others, receive situational updates, and make informed decisions rather than operating blindly. The first technology that becomes critical in such conditions is not dramatic or futuristic. It is something engineers have relied on for decades: decentralized radio communication. Amateur radio systems, particularly those operating on high-frequency and very high-frequency bands, allow communication without relying on cellular networks or internet infrastructure. When properly configured, these systems can transmit messages across neighborhoods, cities, or even continents using atmospheric propagation. During disasters, amateur radio operators frequently become informal communication bridges between isolated communities and emergency coordination centers. The misunderstanding surrounding radio communication is that many people believe it requires large towers or complex equipment. In reality, modern portable transceivers can operate with compact antennas and modest power sources. What matters is not raw transmission strength, but understanding how radio waves interact with the environment. Buildings, terrain, atmospheric conditions, and frequency selection all influence signal behavior. Experienced operators learn to exploit these factors to extend communication, range far beyond what basic specifications might suggest. The hidden science behind radio resilience lies in redundancy and independence. Cellular networks rely on centralized switching infrastructure and synchronized timing systems. If those components fail, the entire network becomes unusable, even if individual towers remain functional. Radio communication operates differently. Each station can function independently, forming temporary networks that adapt dynamically to conditions. In technical terms, this creates a decentralized communication topology, one that does not require a central authority to coordinate transmissions. Evidence of this resilience appears repeatedly in disaster response history. After Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, large parts of the island lost conventional communication networks for weeks. Amateur radio operators played a critical role in relaying emergency messages between isolated towns and mainland coordination centers. Similar patterns occurred after earthquakes in Haiti and Nepal, where radio networks provided early communication links before formal infrastructure could be restored. The survival implications are significant. In a prolonged grid-down environment, information becomes a resource as important as food or water. Knowing which areas have access to fuel, where emergency aid may be distributed, or whether environmental hazards are approaching can change survival strategies dramatically. Without reliable communication, individuals must rely solely on local observation, which limits awareness and increases risk. But communication alone does not sustain survival. Information is valuable only if people have the energy systems required to act on it. This brings us to the second overlooked technology: portable power generation systems, designed specifically for grid-independent operation. Many people think of backup power in terms of gasoline generators. While those machines are powerful, they have serious limitations during prolonged disruptions. They require constant fuel resupply, produce noise that attracts attention, and depend on mechanical maintenance. In a large-scale infrastructure failure, fuel availability quickly becomes uncertain. Engineers working in remote field operations, scientific expeditions, disaster response teams, and military logistics units often rely on a different approach. Instead of large centralized generators, they deploy modular energy systems combining high-efficiency solar panels, lithium battery storage, and advanced power management electronics. These systems convert ambient solar energy into usable electricity and store it for nighttime or cloudy conditions. Over time, the technology has become dramatically more efficient. Modern portable solar arrays can produce significant energy, even in compact configurations, especially when paired with high-capacity lithium iron phosphate batteries known for stability and long cycle life. The misunderstanding here is that solar systems are often perceived as fragile or insufficient for serious use. Early consumer solar panels produced limited output and required large installations to power meaningful loads. But advances in photovoltaic efficiency and battery energy density have changed the equation. Today, compact systems can power communication, equipment, lighting, water purification devices, and small refrigeration units for extended periods without external fuel. The hidden science behind these systems lies in energy budgeting. Every electrical device consumes power at a measurable rate. When users understand these consumption patterns, they can design energy systems that match generation capacity with essential loads. This approach transformed solar equipment from a novelty into a strategic infrastructure substitute. Instead of trying to power an entire household, survival-focused systems concentrate on critical functions: communication, water treatment, medical devices, and low-power lighting. Evidence for the effectiveness of modular solar systems comes from humanitarian field operations. In remote disaster zones where infrastructure is destroyed, aid organizations frequently deploy solar microgrids to power clinics, communication centers, and water purification equipment. These systems operate continuously for months because they rely on renewable energy rather than fuel deliveries. The survival implications extend beyond convenience. Electricity enables technologies that dramatically improve safety and sanitation. Lighting reduces injury risk at night. Refrigeration preserves medical supplies. Electronic navigation devices assist with route planning and environmental awareness. Even small amounts of reliable power can maintain capabilities that would otherwise disappear during a grid failure. Yet there is a third layer of technology that becomes critical once communication and power are stabilized. This layer addresses one of the most overlooked vulnerabilities in modern survival planning: water security. While many people store bottled water for emergencies, those supplies rarely last beyond a few days for an entire household. Long-term survival requires the ability to transform unsafe water sources into drinkable water consistently. The third device often overlooked in preparedness discussions is advanced portable water purification systems based on membrane filtration and ultraviolet sterilization technologies. These systems go far beyond simple filters designed for outdoor recreation. High-end purification units combine microfiltration membranes capable of removing bacteria and protozoa with UV light modules that deactivate viruses by disrupting their genetic material. The misunderstanding surrounding water purification is that boiling water is always sufficient. While boiling can kill many pathogens, it requires significant fuel and does not remove chemical contaminants or sediment. In urban environments especially, water sources may contain industrial pollutants or heavy metals that boiling cannot eliminate. Advanced filtration systems address these limitations by physically separating contaminants at microscopic scales while neutralizing biological threats through targeted radiation wavelengths. The hidden science behind membrane filtration involves pore sizes measured in microns or nanometers. By controlling the diameter of these pores, engineers design filters that allow water molecules to pass while trapping microorganisms and particulate matter. Ultraviolet sterilization adds a secondary barrier by damaging the DNA or RNA of viruses and bacteria, preventing them from reproducing even if they pass through filtration layers. Evidence for these technologies appears across multiple industries. Municipal water treatment plants use variations of membrane filtration and UV sterilization to maintain safe drinking water for millions of people. Portable systems miniaturize these same principles into compact units suitable for field use. Military units operating in remote environments often rely on similar purification equipment to convert river or lake water into potable supplies. The survival implications are profound because water demand is continuous. Humans can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. In a grid-down scenario where municipal treatment facilities lose power, previously safe tap water may quickly become contaminated as pressure drops and untreated water infiltrates. Pipelines. Having independent purification capability transforms nearby natural water sources from hazards into lifelines. But the real importance of these technologies emerges when they are considered together rather than separately. Communication systems allow people to coordinate and gather information. Independent power systems sustain essential equipment without relying on fragile infrastructure. Water purification technologies secure the most critical biological requirement for survival. Together, these tools form a technological triad that replaces key elements of modern infrastructure at a smaller scale. Understanding this triad requires stepping back and recognizing how modern civilization operates. Most of the systems that keep society functioning, electric grids, water treatment plants, telecommunications networks, are enormous centralized structures. They deliver convenience and efficiency under normal conditions, but they also create single points of failure. When those points fail, individuals suddenly find themselves without capabilities they have relied on their entire lives. Preparedness, therefore, becomes less about hoarding supplies and more about restoring functionality at a smaller scale. Technologies discussed here represent miniature versions of the systems that normally operate invisibly in the background of everyday life. They are not mysterious or secret in the sense of hidden knowledge. Instead, they are overlooked because modern infrastructure usually makes them unnecessary. But in a prolonged grid-down environment, overlooked technologies often become the difference between adaptation and vulnerability. As infrastructure continues to degrade during extended disruptions, new layers of challenge begin to emerge, challenges that expose additional misunderstandings about how survival systems actually function once the normal rules of modern society begin to disappear. As infrastructure continues to fail layer by layer, the situation shifts from temporary inconvenience to structural instability. The first 72 hours of a large-scale grid failure are often deceptive. Emergency responders are still operating, backup generators are still running, and many people remain confident that technicians will restore power quickly. But behind the scenes, engineers monitoring the grid understand that recovery becomes exponentially more difficult the longer a blackout persists. Electrical grids are not simple switches that can be turned back on instantly. They are synchronized systems of generation plants, substations, and transmission lines that must operate within extremely tight frequency and voltage tolerances. When the grid collapses, these synchronized relationships disappear. Restarting them requires careful sequencing, stable power sources, and functioning communication networks between operators. This process is known as a black start. Only a limited number of power plants are capable of starting without external electricity. Most large generation facilities require incoming power to activate pumps, control systems, and safety mechanisms before they can produce electricity themselves. In a full-scale outage, black start plants must come online first, then gradually energize transmission lines, then synchronize with additional generators one at a time. If any step in this chain fails, sections of the grid can collapse. Again, engineers have documented situations where restoring regional power systems required days of careful coordination even when the physical infrastructure remained intact. For individuals living within these systems, the consequence is that power restoration timelines are inherently uncertain. A localized outage caused by a damaged transformer might be repaired within hours. A cascading failure across multiple regions may take much longer, especially if the event is combined with natural disasters, cyber disruptions, or extreme weather. During this window of uncertainty, the technologies that allow small groups to maintain independence from the grid become increasingly valuable. However, a misunderstanding often emerges at this stage. Many people believe that once they acquire certain devices' radio equipment, solar generators, purification systems, the problem is solved. But technology alone does not guarantee resilience. Devices are tools, and tools require systems thinking to function effectively. The deeper challenge in grid-down survival is not ownership of equipment, but integration of capabilities. Each system must support the others in a way that maintains operational continuity. The hidden science here is systems engineering, a discipline used by aerospace engineers, infrastructure planners, and disaster management professionals. Systems engineering focuses on how components interact rather than how they perform individually. In survival terms, this means understanding how communication equipment relies on energy systems, how purification systems rely on water access, and how environmental conditions influence the reliability of all devices simultaneously. Evidence of this principle appears repeatedly in field operations conducted by humanitarian relief teams and remote scientific expeditions. Teams operating in isolated environments do not treat power, water, and communication as separate problems. Instead, they design integrated operational platforms where each capability reinforces the others. Solar arrays charge battery systems. Batteries power radios and sensors. Communication systems coordinate resource management. Water purification units ensure safe hydration for personnel maintaining equipment. When any part of this chain fails, the entire operational capability begins to degrade. For example, a communication radio without power is useless. A solar system without energy storage cannot function during nighttime operations. A purification device without access to raw water becomes irrelevant regardless of its filtering capabilities. Survival planning, therefore, requires a shift in mindset from acquiring tools to building functional systems. The survival implications of this shift become clearer when examining the environmental realities of prolonged infrastructure failure. During extended blackouts, urban environments change rapidly. Refrigerated food spoils within days. Water pressure fluctuates as pumps lose energy. Waste management systems become unreliable. These changes alter the biological environment, increasing the risk of contamination and disease transmission. In historical disasters, outbreaks of gastrointestinal illness have often followed disruptions in sanitation and water systems. This creates a secondary challenge that many preparedness discussions overlook: environmental adaptation. When modern infrastructure disappears, humans are suddenly exposed to conditions similar to those experienced in remote wilderness environments or underdeveloped regions. Microbial contamination, vector-borne disease, and waterborne pathogens become immediate concerns. Technologies designed to manage these risks, particularly water purification systems, become essential for maintaining health over extended periods. The hidden science behind waterborne illness is rooted in microbiology. Many pathogens that contaminate water sources are microscopic organisms capable of rapid reproduction under favorable conditions. Bacteria such as Escherichia coli can multiply quickly in warm environments containing organic material. Protozoan parasites like Giardia and Cryptosporidium form protective cysts that allow them to survive outside host organisms for extended periods. Viruses can remain infectious in water long enough to spread through contaminated supplies. Membrane. Filtration and ultraviolet sterilization technologies disrupt these biological pathways in different ways. Filtration physically removes organisms by trapping them within microscopic pores, while ultraviolet radiation damages nucleic acids inside microbial cells. When combined, these mechanisms create multiple barriers against contamination. The redundancy is intentional. Engineers design water treatment systems with overlapping protective layers because no single method is perfect under all conditions. Evidence for this multi-barrier approach appears in municipal water treatment systems worldwide. Large treatment plants typically combine sediment filtration, chemical disinfection, and ultraviolet sterilization to ensure water safety. Portable purification systems replicate these same principles at smaller scales. When used correctly, they can produce safe drinking water even from heavily contaminated sources. But water purification alone does not address the logistical challenges of accessing water in an urban grid-down environment. Many cities rely on electrically powered pumping stations to move water through distribution networks. When those pumps stop functioning, water pressure drops and eventually disappears. Buildings that depend on upper-floor pumping systems lose access to water entirely once backup power systems fail. This creates an immediate shift in how water must be obtained. Instead of flowing directly from taps, water must be collected manually from natural sources, rain capture systems, or remaining municipal reservoirs. The process becomes labor-intensive and time-consuming. People accustomed to unlimited water access may suddenly face the challenge of transporting heavy containers across long distances. The survival implications of this shift extend beyond hydration. Water is necessary for cooking, sanitation, and medical care. Without sufficient water, hygiene practices deteriorate, increasing the spread of disease. Medical treatment becomes more difficult when sterile conditions cannot be maintained. Even simple wound care requires clean water to prevent infection. At this point, the role of portable power systems becomes even more important. Electricity enables pumping systems that can move water from ground-level sources into storage containers or elevated tanks. Small electric pumps powered by solar battery systems can dramatically reduce the labor required to maintain water supply. In humanitarian field operations, solar-powered pumping units are commonly deployed to extract groundwater from shallow wells and distribute it through temporary piping systems. The misunderstanding many people have about solar power in survival scenarios is that it functions like a conventional electrical grid. In reality, solar systems require active energy management. Solar output fluctuates based on sunlight intensity, panel orientation, and weather conditions. Effective use of solar energy requires planning electrical loads around these fluctuations. Hidden science behind this process lies in energy storage chemistry. Lithium iron phosphate batteries have become widely used in portable energy systems because they combine high cycle life with thermal stability. Unlike older lithium-ion chemistries, they are less prone to overheating and can tolerate thousands of charge-discharge cycles without significant degradation. This reliability makes them suitable for long-term off-grid applications. Evidence for the durability of these systems appears in renewable energy installations used in remote research stations and telecommunications relay points. In locations where fuel deliveries are impractical, solar battery systems operate continuously for years with minimal maintenance. Engineers design these installations to prioritize critical loads communication equipment, sensors, lighting while limiting energy consumption from non-essential devices. In survival conditions, adopting the same philosophy becomes essential. Electrical power must be treated as a limited resource. Lighting systems may need to shift from high-wattage household bulbs to low-power LED devices. Communication equipment should operate intermittently rather than continuously to conserve.